to Group Two's presentation on Hydro One. My name is Patrick Matson Williams. My team members are Keelana Wheeler, Melissa Hernandez, and Ben Craver. Very important to the corporate risk management class that all of us are involved in. Me and my team enjoyed thoroughly learning about Hydro One, and not only learning about Hydro One as a company, but the Chief Risk Officer, John Fraser. Hydro One today is an electricity transmission and distribution utility in the Canadian province of Ontario, headquartered in Toronto. Today, with $25 billion in assets, around $6.5 billion in annual revenue, and serving 1.4 customers, Hydro One itself is a large operation to dive into. Pertaining to our class, Hydro One, on a background of strategic risk and apparent risk, has had its highs and lows. And that's one of the most fascinating aspects of this case study and what John Fraser, their Chief Risk Officer, has done to incorporate them into a profitable standpoint and mitigate and hedge against their risk through enterprise risk management, and being one of the main reasons for the foundation and success of incorporating risk management into their company culture. John Fraser himself, for the latter part of 40 years, has been involved in banking, auditing, investing, and risk management, has numerous publications, authored many books, been a part of many panels, and actually now is retired. So for all of us risk management insurance students who are graduating, moving on, or looking for their jobs, this just might be a huge opportunity. Bulk up the resume, turn on the LinkedIn, and shoot out your networks. I'm saying this obviously jokingly with our small experience in the industry. However, he'll be impressed that we studied him and moved on the Hydro One case study. Moving forward, when I could research Hydro One, they had incorporated a faulty perception of risk management, not only from a failed initial public offering, employee strike, age systems, environmental uncertainty. Overall, their customer satisfaction for the latter part of the 20 years has not been good. With most public infrastructure, especially in the energy sector, age systems is a huge issue, not only on internal threats, but in external threats, for example, a cyber attack from maybe a foreign government or just an entity that didn't maybe not like Canada at the time or the community surrounding. We will talk about in this project different steps working with John Fraser of how Hydro One was able to move past this and not only mitigate and hedge against their risk, but also build their risk into profitable standpoints and silo it correctly. It's that my team would like to point out about Hydro One is that through the list below on the strategic planning, one of the main reasons bouncing off from their bad reputation losses prior from poor strategic risk and reputation risk management is that they had employee strikes. Their customer service satisfaction was terrible. Actually, it sucked. Moving forward right now, one of the goals of the C-suites is not only to be A-rated, but to have over a 90% customer satisfaction role. You can see that in some key rollouts that have been in the news that talk about taking away deposits for customers, maybe families that are less fortunate than you or I, or in similar positions of you and I, struggling to pay bills. Also, in the winter times, not turning off power for certain customers around. Also, just a day ago, they released that their customer service is going to be open on the weekends, which is unheard of for most Canadian power infrastructure systems. Moving forward, we'll talk about more, but what I really want to point on is the importance of customer satisfaction and A rating, which incorporates risk management full-heartedly. As you can see, going back to our second slide and the Chief Risk Officer, John Fraser, one of the big importance and acquisitions of bringing John Fraser to the team for over 13 years was that John was a big believer in enterprise risk management. And to me, there's a multitude of different definitions and laundry lists of what ERM, but for me, it's just ERM is a ubiquitous, holistic approach to really developing a risk management system that not only works for the top line, the bottom line, but the company as a whole to move forward profitably, safely, and effectively. As you can see, our point with employees of getting work done to improve morale. John Fraser was a big believer in workshops. He also believed that you needed to be on your feet to make a decision, but these risk workshops not only broke down silos between management and boards, but got to bring risk management as a focal point to a company core value, which a lot of companies, and especially in the 21st century, you have seen implement more. A focal point to enterprise risk management, ERM, especially ERM relating to Hydro One, is ERM's ability to organize risks. And by this, I mean not looking at risks just through a microscopic level of this impacts this risk, this, mitigating this, is that it's moving risks into a correlation or organization based on how they might want to affect each other or create a dominoes effect, or how different risks might cluster, and how to allocate resources to maybe on a higher frequency or diversion plan to a shock loss or a higher severity risk. These are all implications and techniques developed through enterprise risk management. And this was a big importance of bringing John Fraser to the team. As we looked, and I talked about at the last slide, with John Fraser and his big believing in risk workshops, risk managers continually through Hydro One are developed in interactive workshops, help to focus different questions and concerns between the company. Fancy word, and a word you see a lot thrown around, is the Delphi method, which Hydro One implemented. And this, all it comes down to is just bouncing off ideas off of high caliber professionals, risk professionals, and a kind of board setting. And this has been implemented and been effective through Hydro One, and especially you can see now with them turning the market and especially developing an A rating. The process of effective risk management is redeveloping the risk culture, embedding risk management, safety concerns at every core level, at every employee, at a focal point. This is one of the largest differences in main reasons to Hydro One's success to redevelop themselves in the industry and become a top player like they wanted to believe. And this is also big on John Fraser. He really believed in really embedding that risk management culture. And I really, myself personally in my own company, and I believe that most of my team members as well agree that moving forward compared to 20 to 30 to 50 years ago, risk management has become a forepoint to all successful companies in the world. Comparing and contrasting Hydro One and JPL, to break it down even further, is that John Fraser and Gentry Lee both had the same goal in mind, to mitigate risk, to be able to hedge their risk when it becomes developed, and then also properly prepare their company, and also use, especially with John Fraser, use risk as an advantage. With risk comes opportunity. However, looking at these two individuals, Gentry Lee was a senior engineer. John Fraser was the chief risk officer. John Fraser kind of had, you would even look at it, a more artsy approach compared to Gentry Lee, who was very finite, scientific, and step after step. When, as I've mentioned before, John Fraser looked at it more of a holistic approach. Even though Hydro One and JPL both successfully implemented a risk culture in both of their companies, there was some main differences. First, JPL was project-based. Hydro One is not. JPL used a panel of 12 experts. Hydro One had management votes. JPL maintained more of a centralized risk framework, while Hydro One actually took to decentralize and really pushed the initiative on each one of its employees making risk management an employee responsibility as well as a corporate level responsibility. Lee versus John Fraser, and I don't even really like that title. I would say Gentry, Lee, John Fraser, differences and similarities, building on the last slides. I think it's not only important to focus on that both of these stout professional individuals got the job done on a basis of risk management, but they both wholeheartedly believed in the success of implementing ERM and really pushing that towards a company culture. And this part of enterprise risk management, the big picture, the measurement of value created. Obviously, at the end of the day, risk management is going to affect your bottom line. You don't want your company to start losing money, and inadvertently, you don't want to be in a situation where a shock loss could destroy your company and liquidate all assets and put you out of business. So, henceforth, on this is where detailed analysis is pulled into the enterprise risk management program, where frequency and severity charts are looked at thoroughly, and where we bring in the cluster process and the tier process of risk management and how to mitigate and allocate against that and develop reserves that would protect a company in the terrible situation of a shock loss. Of Hydro One's ERM program is a perfect segue from the last slide. The last slide I was talking about risk severity versus risk frequency. And throughout the presentation, I've talked about tiering risks, looking at cluster risks, looking at outlier risks, looking at shock risks that create shock losses, looking at risks that might start a cannonball effect and bleed into certain hazards that usually you wouldn't think would bleed into. But the point of it at the end is that Hydro One really incorporated the ERM approach of hypothetically developing in these workshops, tiering down different risks, and putting levels of severity on the risks, which would help you incorporate a better plan than an all caption fits all policy. ERM program is the future of, as most individuals that have ever taken an ERM class, been a part of ERM training, read an ERM book, is that ERM is an organic risk management approach. It's continually developing, it's continually reapplying, readapting to its surrounding, and also individuals around it. That's why it's such an interactive approach between everybody involved in the company. Hydro One itself, right now, I see it not just only in the news. They were in a news article just a day ago about keeping their customer service options open on the weekend when most of their surrounding competitors do not. Also, Hydro One currently put on the Flip the Switch campaign that takes away reserves and deposits needed from maybe families that are not as financially stable at the current time to put down deposits to gain electricity and heat to live. But also during the winter months when some families might not be able to afford their bill and they get their electricity turned off. The Flip the Switch program is completely against that, and Hydro One has been a part of that. Not this only mitigates on customer satisfaction, but also undesired needs or outlier risks that could include communities failing, reputational risk on that behalf, regulation or deregulation aspects that would hurt the company on different channels based on their approach. So I look at Hydro One's ERM program continuing to flourish, and they already have yields of success from 20 years ago based on when they're moving forward. And me and my team, I know that it was very interesting to study. Please post them in the discussion or individually message each one of us. But to end our presentation, I thought it'd also be good to refer back to ASWAT's Strategic Risk-Taking Framework book and really note that, enterprise risk management also incorporates that risk brings about opportunity and possibility. And so there's two aspects of risk. And one is the exploit risk. And I think that's also a key aspect that John Fraser brought to Hydro One, and one that all of us need to balance in our lives on a day-to-day basis. The risk and reward based on every outcome, every possibility, and every endeavor that we choose. Well, everyone have a great day. Thanks for listening to me.